Welcome to Service Titans, the podcast where we dive deep into the inspiring journeys of Black men within the AmeriCorps community. From serving in classrooms to rebuilding neighborhoods, these are the stories of passion, purpose, and resilience. Join us as we amplify the voices of members of the AmeriCorps community and share their triumphs, challenges, and the impact they've made in their communities. Whether you're a seasoned AmeriCorps veteran or someone considering service, this is the space to explore, reflect, and be inspired. Get ready to be uplifted, empowered, and connected. This is Service Titans.
The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individuals speaking and do not reflect the views of their employers, organizations, or any groups they may be affiliated with. We are here to have real, honest conversations, and that means everything shared is coming from personal perspectives, not on behalf of any company or institution. Some episodes may include discussions around sensitive topics that could be triggering or emotionally intense for some listeners. Please take care of yourself and pause if you need to.
Deontre, welcome to the podcast. Really, thank you for taking the time to share your experience with our community. But I always love to start with the foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what experience helped shape you as a man and set that foundation, but also that commitment to serving others?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me again, brother. So Deontre Clayton, transpond. I am from a town called Roxboro, North Carolina, very rural community in North Carolina. I'm a Southern boy in the sticks. So just kind of what shaped me to begin to work in service. So I was a straight A student in elementary and middle school. I always did very well academically. I came from a single parent household with a mother who was initially like, just do your best. And then when she saw that your best was straight A's, that's when she expected. So I did very well elementary, middle school, got to high school, and my grades began to suffer tremendously. It was because there was so much going on. She and I moved. She was experiencing some challenges at that time. And in ninth grade, I started to slip, a lot of C's, a lot of B's. And then by the time I got to 10th, 11th, 12th grade, it was just like, I was barely hanging on. Part of it was that I was also working a job. I had got a job at Wendy's. I felt like I was the man of the house. So I was trying to, not putting it on her, but I felt like I had a duty to help. Yeah. So just me working coupled with seeing her not in the best place and happy in her life. And then just also the pressures of being, becoming a young man without the direct male father in the household to help. It was a lot of different pressures. And I just was struggling mentally coping. And school was just like the last thing on my mind. But anyway, I had a high school counselor. I was friends with the young lady in middle school. Her mom was my guidance counselor in high school. And she remembered me from middle school. She was like, you were my daughter's grade, Trey. I remember you. You were so smart. You were always going on the stage getting awards. Like, what's going on? This is not you. Her name was Helen Johnson. And she really she really poured into me. Like, she made sure that she called. If it had not been for her, I wouldn't even gave the effort that I did give. But she stayed on me enough to make sure that I got the bare minimum there. For long story short, got into my senior year, and I had F in my senior English, and they told me that I would not be able to walk. I was just like, yeah, I'm too proud for this. Like, if I don't walk, I'm just probably going to get my GED. I'm not coming back here for another semester. Yeah. That's shameful. Not doing it. She had to beg that English teacher, because they didn't know me from growing up. They didn't know that I was a straight A student. They didn't know. They just saw me as a young black boy who just didn't care. That's how most of my teachers in high school saw me. Just another young black boy who don't care. Yeah.
Another statistic. Yeah.
Another statistic, exactly. But she knew that wasn't the case. So she begged that teacher that, if he makes up this work, can you grade it, please? She said, and the teacher said, yes, I'll grade it if it passes school. But she had to fight for that. So she called me. She was like, listen, she's going to let you make up this work. You call out of work today. You're not going to win it tonight. You get your behind home and you figure it out. When she did that, I went and I grind all night from the time I got that call to literally right before it was time to shower and go to school the next morning. Turned to work in. She called me back the evening and she said she graded the work, got a D, you can walk. So that allowed me to walk, and I told her I was so appreciative of her for that. And she was like, you know what, you are more in your current circumstance. You need to get away. You need a first start. So she began to ask me about colleges and where I wanted to go. I wasn't certain, but I know that I had a relative, aunt that had went to North Carolina A&T. she had went to North Carolina A&T, and one time I was in middle school, we did a school business in North Carolina A&T. So I was like, hey, let's try.
That's the spot.
Yeah. So she got me waived for my SAT. I went into the SAT like 2 weeks later. I met with her. She helped me to apply for A&T. I got the letter in the mail about a month later. I got accepted. And I mean, literally everything was last minute. And I promised her, I said, listen, when I get to A&T, I'm going back to that version of me that you knew prior to school. And when I got to A&T, I was able to graduate in 3 years. I graduated with honors, and I've been able to go on and continue to thrive in my academics. And I always credited to Miss Helen Johnson because she cared. And I never had that one person that cared. My entire trajectory may have been different. So kind of fast forwarding to the service piece now, while in North Carolina A&T, first of all, there was a profound experience, Aggie prior. That was so to be able to see, to have there was the first time I had Black male teachers. I had, middle school to high school, we had coaches. In middle school, I had a gentleman who was like over like student discipline, and he poured into us. But this was the first time that I seen Black men as active
lead in the clique. Yeah.
So that was just profound for me, and it just showed me like, you can do something else for real. So hands down, one of the best decisions I made that shaped so much in me was going to North Carolina A&T. So while I was there, I was a criminal justice major, and I had really got involved in like, the Innocence Project, and just seeing like the number of Black men who were getting arrested and how the sentences were longer for Black men, and how the Innocence Project taking a toll on me because I was seeing all these men that had been released after giving up so many of their years for being falsely accused, and I just really wanted to work in that space. So my plan was to leave North Carolina A&T and to go to law school, and I wanted to go to Howard Law School. That was my plan. But while I was at A&T, because I told you in high school I worked there when I needed employment, and I was walking around campus one day and I saw a flyer posted. It was the Black Child Development Institute of Greensboro, North Carolina, and they were looking to hire tutors to work as AmeriCorps members in schools in Greensboro, North Carolina. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, at this time I was an RA. I was making a little money as an RA. And I'm like, I wanted some additional income. And I honestly was thinking about maybe I should just try to work in the winnings up here. And I saw that, I'm like, wow, this is a way I can earn money. I can work around my school schedule, and it's like professional work experience that looks better on my resume. So I saw the flyer, I went to the website, I applied, got called back, and I got interviewed, and I got the position. And when I began to work in that program with the Black Child Development Institute as an AmeriCorps tutor, I was placed at a school called Scale Academy in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I really fell in love with it. Like, I was working with a teacher. It was alternative schools that we were working with young men. I don't want to say at risk, but I was placed in the classroom with young men that were experiencing challenges similar to me. I really enjoyed that work. And I'll never forget, there was a young man named Marco, and then Marco told me, he was like, Mr. Trey, if the real teacher was like you, and that always resonated with me. So I graduated, I took the LSAT, I decided to take a gap year before going to law school, because I'm like, I really want to spend all this money. I had a cousin who was a tax attorney in Baltimore, and she said, well, you can come here and intern just to get around the legal space. I knew I didn't want to practice tax law, but I'm like, okay, cool. I would stay with her for a year after I graduated, and I worked at her law firm as an intern. And I just realized, though, even though I didn't want to practice tax law, that still, even though I was still passionate about that work in the criminal justice system, I didn't necessarily want to practice law. I realized that wasn't for me. So I began thinking about, like, what did I enjoy? What do I like? All I could think about,
reflection. Yeah.
Exactly. And all I could think back to was that experience serving as an AmeriCorps tutor with the Black Child Development Institute. And it always reflected about, like, I may have made a milestone for some of those students, similar to how Mr. Johnson did for me. So I began to Google work that, with mission statements that kind of mirror the Black Child Development Institute. And lo and behold, Teach for America comes up.
Wow.
This program will allow me to teach for 2 years. They'll help me to relocate. They'll help get my master's degree. Then they'll give me some time to earn some income and figure it out. So I applied, got accepted, got placed in Miami. Miami was not where I thought I would be. Everybody loves Miami, right? But like, literally the way Teach for America was set up then was that you picked your top 3 locations, your middle 3, and your lowest 3. Miami was like in my lowest 3 just because, it's like Miami. Like, I got to pick 9 places and just choose Miami. But when TFA was set up then, wherever they, you pick those 9, and they're saying that if any of these 9 that you get, you got to take.
You can go anywhere. Yeah. You put you anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got Miami, and I came in here and I began to teach in Opa-locka. I taught middle school ELA, and again, it was some of the most rewarding work that I've done. And from that experience, I worked in education in some capacity ever since. So from
Man,
that time, yeah, from 2014 to now, I've worked in education. So I really credit my journey into education, one from the Black Child Development Institute as an AmeriCorps tutor, then doing Teach for America as a core member, which is still a part of the AmeriCorps network. So ultimately the role that I'm in now, when I've grown in this organization, but now I serve as a director of programs for the AmeriCorps program, in which we hire tutors who work in early childhood spaces. So they work in early childhood classrooms to support lead teachers. And the goal is to get those students on track in literacy and numeracy. And I found that when I was a classroom teacher teaching middle school ELA, there were so many young men and so many students that looked like me that struggled with reading.
Struggling. Yeah.
Yeah. And I realized like that, it's the system. Like, they struggle with reading, they have limited opportunities, they end up in jail. So
it's a pipeline. It's a pipeline. Yeah.
So like ultimately me doing that work was still helping to reduce the number of young men that may end up in the prison system. So all the work was still connected. Even now, I have the opportunity to work in a space that is AmeriCorps, which I've grown to love, is tied to education, which I've grown to love because I've been a teacher. And now we are running a program that helps students at the onset to give them a strong start, to be strong readers and to grow academically. So it all kind of comes full circle.
Cool. That's experience is like so dope. And I think it speaks so much to the power of both AmeriCorps, but also representation and having someone who's leading a classroom that reflects your experience in some ways, but also it's already pretty cool. You sort of get to be that person that Ms. Johnson was for you for other young people in your career. So that's so dope. And I also kind of chuckle to myself, like I've had so many of these conversations and, the advancement of technology and all the things that we do, but so many people found AmeriCorps, found the program on a flyer. So also lets me know it's cool to do some of the old school things like posting a flyer. You never know who's going to see that flyer. Yeah. So
it's like in 2011, but that's what it was. I saw a flyer and I'm glad I made the call.
That's pretty dope. So as you're kind of sharing that, I know that your leadership and your journey has taken you across multitude of different communities, different programs. Can you talk a little bit like what has that transition been like for you, like from a leadership standpoint? And what do you do to continue to fuel your fire as you're going through this work and leading other young people? Like any things that you do to kind of continue to support yourself and move through this work as a leader?
Yeah. So, I believe in all professional development. I believe that we should always be learning. So, some of my educational experience has really allowed me to, I received a master's in leadership from Columbia. And a great part of that was really understanding like group and team dynamics. Okay. It spoke from the lens of like managing educational organizations. So I lead with relational and authentic leadership. Like I lead with that daily. I'm accessible to my members, but I'm also accessible to my team, to the staff that report directly to me. I feel like when you are a leader, you lead by being present and by doing. You don't have to exploit your title. So when it goes back to like just the dynamic of the tutors, I'm accessible. I'm really thinking about their member experience and what they're getting out of this program. Part of AmeriCorps is preparing our tutors and our members for life beyond AmeriCorps. So I want to make sure that we are providing them with their own production development and resources to continue to go into fields that our service oriented. I know that my staff does a tremendous amount of work, and I know that the pay is modest. AmeriCorps pay is modest. So I want to make sure that they feel fulfilled and that I'm engaging with them and I'm pouring into them, and that I lead from a standpoint of I'm not just giving you tasks to do, but I'm also here with you. And we're going to, in the AmeriCorps space, things change daily. So I want to make sure that we're solution oriented, but I'm right here with you, helping you figure out what is a satisfactory solution to make this work. So that's kind of how I move daily. But my educational experience, I'm always looking at different ways to grow my craft and how I interact and how I lead in different trainings to make sure that everything I'm doing is relevant. And I always lead with my team in mind. So although I like to get their opinions on things, so although, you still have to make the executive decision yourself sometimes, you still like to know, people need to know that their opinion matters and that they were included in the decision-making process, whether it goes their way or not. So that's kind of how I operate on a day-to-day space. And then even when it comes down to the members, as director, I still make it a point of mine to go to every site at least one time to visit every member in person so that they see me. I like to make sure that we have what we call welcome sessions. So as new members are coming into the organization, that they get a chance to meet me. I like them to know like I am available and this is real. I'm a person. Forget the director title. I've been on, and we want to see you all aware. This is real work that you're doing, And I feel my tutors all the time, like, their students may not remember, they're not going to, especially in important 4 and 5-year-olds, the space that we support, they're not going to be able to differentiate between you being a teacher, early learning to anything. All they want to know is that you were in their classroom, you were the other teacher, and they're going to remember how you made them feel, because I can still remember my particular teacher today.
Yeah. As you were sharing a little bit in the intro, as far as just like your foundation, you talked a little bit about just like the transition into AmeriCorps work. And sometimes there's what I call this invisible barrier, particularly the financial piece that prevents, and sometimes young Black men from making that commitment to serve. Would there be any advice that you would give other young professionals, or particularly young Black men who are sort of at that point, like they feel that they're called to serve, but there's a lot of different barriers, whether that's socioeconomic, whether that's just a lot of family dynamics that expect for you to go into some other field. Like from your experience, like what would you tell like other young people, but particularly young Black men who are like at that crossroad?
Right. Well, definitely, I was speaking with someone a few weeks ago, like when I did my AmeriCorps position in college with the Black Child Development Institute. I think my biweekly stipend was $225. But again, as a college student during that time, I lived on campus, I hate on campus, so that was, it was manageable at that particular time. Not today, but one of my biggest things is that I really feel I'd like to see young Black men, specifically young men in general, young minority men, but specifically, I am a Black man. I lead with that, and you see that first. But it's one of my plights to have more young Black men in this program, because again, the schools that I support and my program supports, they are predominantly inner city schools, and they have students that look like me. And I feel like those students need to see young men that look like them. And there are not a lot of men in education in general, but specifically not in the early childhood space. So, I definitely do a lot of sourcing, and really, and when we do get that 5 or that 10, I really try to pour into them, because this is not an easy space to be in as a Black man. It's a man, period. But as a Black man specifically, that space is not an easy space to be in. So some things that I do are really just to kind of like just pour into them. We have some professional groups that we have where we're checking in with them on a weekly basis. But from the financial standpoint, it's really just talking about how to use this experience to leverage your next opportunity, how to market what you're doing and the skills that you're doing to your next opportunity. And I think being very intentionally working with them about, what you can do in service, what you can do in education, what roles you can grow into from this particular experience, and making sure they see a pathway for that.
Yeah. Trey, very similar to you, like most of my experience has been both in the education nonprofit field. And one thing that has been a glaring concern of mine is like the lack of representation, and often having to navigate spaces where there are not a lot of people who look like me. What has that journey been like for you personally, as you've kind of moved through various different roles, various different experiences, and as you mentioned, leading as a Black man and being unapologetic about that? How does that show up in your leadership, and how has that impacted your career in some ways?
Oh, yeah. There was a time in my career that I definitely experienced some of the imposter syndrome. And I feel as though, as a Black man, I've always, I'm working on a doctorate degree now. That's something that's important to me. I always wanted to be Dr. Clayton. I really was doing it not so much to earn a different tier income wise, but for me, it was important to do it. And I really wanted to do it to show the younger men in my family, like, hey, this is something that's doing, like, to be the first. We finally have a cousin now that is a doctor. She's doing phenomenal. She's actually known on the national scale for her work, and she has a PhD. But we don't have any men yet. So I really want to make sure that they know that it's accessible. But kind of going back to your question, I've always felt like I had to go the extra mile. We have to do more to show our worth as Black men to be taken seriously. So even in this current role that I'm in, and before I got into the director role, working as a program manager or program specialist, part of my role was site visits. And in the communities that we serve in South Florida, there will be times that I would go into schools, and when I would be going to the schools for the site visits, they would automatically look at me, even as director, when I didn't have on my suit or a blazer and just had on like a regular shirt and chinos or just jeans. And it's like, I'm here for, oh, you're the new tutor. So automatically automatically the mind shifted, not that you're the director of the program, but because, one, at that time I was younger, but also like, I just didn't look like what they were expecting to come into the space as a person to be managing or overseeing this program. I've experienced that a lot. So I think that has shifted because now, in my mind, I'm like, okay, whenever I'm going to a certain school or a certain area, I have to make sure that I have on a suit because I want to make sure, because I know as a Black man, I'm treated differently automatically by what I have on. I found myself again working to get certain credentials because I felt like that's how you take it more seriously. So I found myself having to do more to get to the same positions as people of other, races. I feel like what may be more easier for them, sometimes you have to work just a tad bit harder to reach some of those same things. And you definitely can see the looks, and you definitely can, be friendly. And I've seen the look of surprise, but it's like when they meet you and they see that you're competent and that you're knowledgeable, it's a different energy. But definitely, there's been times that I've received glances or the wrong perception at first, simply by how I look.
Yeah, I can definitely say being in this education space, also being in service in schools, that both from administration, parents, et cetera, there seems that there's this extra level of proving yourself in some ways. And unfortunately, it starts with the appearance sometimes. So no, I definitely can like understand that, brother. You also a little bit, Trey, talked about like legacy. I thought it was so dope. You talked about just like family legacy and wanting to be that example for the young men in your family. When you take a moment to think about just like your legacy and how it's rooted to service and AmeriCorps work, do you take moments to think about that? I think like me personally, as I'm getting older and knowing that a lot of the work that I've done has hopefully helped others along the way, but also just like stay rooted in my why, which I think is like part of the foundation of this podcast. Do you take time now to kind of think about like your legacy, your work under this AmeriCorps umbrella, or just in general?
All the time. All the time. I think about when you education and AmeriCorps space. So I think back to my first year teaching. I started teaching in 2014. I was 22 years old. And I say all the time, like, I feel like the students that had me their first year, I feel like they probably didn't learn anything. Because, we were burned out. We had to figure it out together. But to this day, in the different spaces I worked in, whether it be, teaching, I worked in a boarding school in the student life department, in this AmeriCorps program, and just in other roles that I've done, seasonal summertime roles, et cetera, with different organizations. I always said there was just one that I made an impact on, if there was just one. And I've been blessed to have not one, but many. There are times I had a young man, I worked at the C school in Miami one time for about 9 years in the student life role. And I had a young man who, as a 7th grader, I mean, he gave me a hard time. And, got older, and he went to college and stayed in contact with me. And like, this young man called me a few weeks ago to let me know about his graduation next year in May, because he said, I know you're busy, and I want to make sure that you have it on the calendar.
That's so dope, man.
In those calls, just thinking back to, when I was teaching and having on, I'm in the fraternity, I'm a member of Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and having on, my shirt, and people students asking about what it was, and so getting those phone calls today about Mr. Clay, hey, I remember you talking about this, like, I want to do it, or being able to go and see them make it to the other side. In the current space, there's a young Black man, that's working in the program. And I oftentimes say, we have to make sure that we celebrate our members for what they're doing right. A lot of times, we are thinking about compliance, and like, when something's wrong, we're sending emails, but we just have to celebrate him. And one day I reached out to him because he served in the previous year, and he had some personal things going on. And I just called him one day randomly and said, what, I just want to tell you, you're doing a great job.
Yes,
I'm so proud of you. And he told me, he was like, what, you don't know how much I needed to just hear someone say good job. Like, that meant so much to him, because he hadn't heard a person tell him good job in such a long time. And like, that skyrocketed him he was the rock star of the year from that point forward.
Just to let you know, I see you, man. I see you.
I see you. And not for something negative. Like, I see what you're doing. And sometimes we forget to do that on a regular scale. Like, it's always the negative. So, but to answer your question, I always think every decision I make, everything that I do, I'm thinking about like legacy. How did it impact someone? How was I able to inspire someone? It's not about me. And I think like my true work as a servant leader really shows through how I impacted other people. So, like I said, I've been blessed to have students, mentees from different organizations that I've been able to impact. And I don't look for their recognition, but whenever you get those calls or those texts or those out of the blue LinkedIn and Instagram messages, it makes you feel fulfilled. And like I said, if I just had one, but I've been blessed to have a few. So that is really what makes me continue to do this type of work. And it really drives how I carry myself from day to day.
Oh man, that's so dope, traders. And I think when you're going through those tough moments in this work, to get those calls and know like you're having that imprint on someone is like super dope and why we do what we do. And I think it's a great segue into one of my favorite parts of this conversation is and I think you started with just showing some love to Ms. Johnson a little bit earlier, but I want to make sure like we give some intentional time to highlight a service titan in your life, someone who's had a large or small impact on you. And as we think that sometimes it's important to just give people their flowers, and sometimes we don't do that in ways that maybe we could. I want to ask you, Trey, like, is there a service titan in your life that you would like to just kind of show some love here on the podcast, whether it's something small or something big? Just want to give you the space to highlight what they've meant to you.
Yeah, awesome. So I would definitely say Bertrand Poole. Mr. Poole was that middle school gentleman that I spoke about. He was over like the discipline in middle school, but he was the first Black male staff that I've seen that wasn't a custodian. Because in elementary school, the only Black men I've seen were custodians. And shout out to them because that still felt some connectness. They made sure to give us the thumbs up and high fives back in the 90s.
You're right.
Yeah, you're right. And would give you that look if you were getting out of line. And I appreciate it. Those were true uncles back in the day. So Mr. Poole, he went to North Carolina A&T, but when I got to middle school, again, seeing him and sometimes they stereotype Black men as well as they don't really can do this, but he was so much more than that. He had an organization that he started that was called Men of Distinction. And that organization was, it wasn't open to just young Black men, but it was catered. It was for us, really. He always joined, we met, he checked our grades, once a week on Thursdays, we wore white shirts, we had the same tie. He tossed our tie, and you behaved differently because you knew that you were one of Mr. Poole's boys. And Poole checked upon you. You knew that Men of Distinction had an era about it in middle school, and you were expected to behave a certain way. You were expected to perform academically. And we lived for those Thursdays. Like we knew, we thought we were, we straight our stuff off the rest of school with those ties and looking professional. And I think that was my first introduction into like knowing how to conduct myself as a young man, realizing that you're treated differently when you carry yourself a certain way, when you look good, showing you what professionalism is, and showing that you are more than what you see negatively on the media and what the stereotypes may be. So he definitely initiated that drive into me to want to care how I conducted myself, and to even, again, the way I learned how to tie a tie is the way I tie today. And that was something I learned from that program. That was a school program. That was something that this man took the time out of his schedule to do. And he did it with fidelity. It wasn't like we were just meeting. We had real programming. We had real positions, president, vice president, secretary. And like that taught us the structure that I needed. So I still talk to Mr. Poole to this day. He recently retired, wasn't able to go to North Carolina for that. I think from middle school to now, to still be in contact with him and to still have so much respect for that organization and how it helped mold me, he would definitely be my service type.
Oh, that's dope, man. And shout out that's like super cool. The fact that the standard is the standard. I'm a football fan, and Mike Tomlin says that, and it seemed like that standard was set for you all as young men, and just set that foundation. So thanks for like sharing that with our audience here. Trey, before we conclude, I want to make sure that I give an opportunity for you to share things that you may be working on with our listeners, maybe your social media handles, any cool projects you're working on. I want to make sure we give the space for you to kind of uplift that in ways that people for kind of get connected to you and your journey.
Awesome. Yeah. So at this time, there's no specific project that I'm probably working on right at this time. I do have plans of working on my first book in the near future.
Okay. We'll be listen for that. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll get that to you. We'll stay tuned. But at this particular time, my focus is just personal growth. I'm working on wrapping my doctoral program. So that's something that's important to me. But I'm always out and about. I'm in the community. I'm a true servant leader. I'm a part of the 100 Black Men in South Florida, Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Prince Hall Masonry. So everything that I do really revolves around service. So, I'm available. I love mentoring. If there's anyone who's interested in the AmeriCorps space, how to navigate higher education as a Black man and pursuing your educational journey, I'm available, and I have the resources to talk about what my experience was like and how we can get there. So if you want to connect with me, my LinkedIn is Deontre L. Clayton. Instagram is Clayton_D_Lamar. And then my Facebook is my name, Deontre Clayton. So feel free to connect.
Oh, awesome. Trey, again, like truly thank you for taking the time to join the podcast, sharing your insights, your experiences. Listeners, be sure to connect with Trey on the platforms that he highlighted. And with that, until next time, keep the conversation flowing, keep service front and center, and continue shining bright in your communities. This is Service Titans. Thank you for listening.
Thank Thank you for joining us as we explored the inspiring journeys of Black men in AmeriCorps. Keep the conversation going by connecting with us on social media. Until next time, stay committed, stay courageous, and keep striving to make a difference. This is Service Titans, where every story told is a testament to the power of service. Thank you for listening.